They said the world would never allow another genocide after the horrors of the 20th century. Yet, here we are, watching in real time as history repeats itself. Entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble, children buried beneath concrete, families torn apart, and still, the bombs fall. Gaza has become the symbol of humanity's greatest failure, and yet also its most defiant hope. Why are nations now beginning to recognize Palestine? Why has the suffering of this small strip of land ignited a firestorm of outrage across the globe? And most importantly, what does this tell us about power, justice, and the silence of those who claim to lead the free world? For decades, the question of Palestine has lingered like an open wound in international politics. The creation of Israel in 1948 was celebrated by some as the rebirth of an ancient homeland. Yet for the Palestinians, it marked what they call the Nakba catastrophe. Over 700,000 people were displaced, entire villages erased, their descendants now spread across refugee camps in Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and beyond. Israel was recognized almost immediately by Western powers, backed militarily and financially by the United States. But Palestine, the land those people once called home, has been denied full recognition as a sovereign state for over 70 years. Why now, then, are we seeing a shift? The answer lies in the brutal clarity of recent events. Since the attacks of October 7th, Gaza has endured one of the most devastating bombardments in modern history. Entire hospitals have been targeted, schools flattened, food and water cut off. International aid organizations have used words once avoided in polite diplomacy, words like genocide, ethnic cleansing, and collective punishment. Nations that once hesitated to criticize Israel are now forced to reckon with images of mass graves and starving children, transmitted instantly across social media. The world is watching, and the silence has become unbearable. Several Western nations, including Spain, Ireland, Norway, and more recently others across Europe, have announced official recognition of the State of Palestine. These moves are not merely symbolic. They represent a growing refusal to accept the narrative that Israel alone has the right to security and existence. Leaders in these countries argue that peace cannot be built on the erasure of an entire people. Recognition is, in their words, the first step toward justice. But while some nations speak, others remain complicit. The United States, Israel's strongest ally, continues to provide billions in military aid, diplomatic cover in the United Nations, and advanced weaponry used in Gaza's destruction. Critics argue that without American backing, Israel could not sustain such a war. Every drone that strikes a humanitarian convoy, every bomb that flattens a school, carries the fingerprints of Washington. The world sees this and asks, how can a nation that claims to defend human rights abroad support such horror? Yet within America itself, public opinion is shifting. Millions of ordinary citizens march in the streets. Students occupy universities, and Jewish voices are among the loudest demanding an end to the killings. The divide between the people and their government has never been sharper. Meanwhile, Islamic nations, from Pakistan to Turkey, Iran to Indonesia, have united in condemnation. For Muslims, Palestine is more than politics. It is sacred. Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, the third holiest site in Islam, stands as a symbol of their faith, and its occupation is seen as a deep insult. But the outrage extends beyond religion. Many Christians and even secular groups recognize the biblical lands of Palestine as part of their heritage. For them too, Gaza's suffering is an open wound that defies moral justification. Pakistan's stance has been especially vocal. Its leaders openly challenge the double standards of Western powers, reminding the world that if such atrocities were committed elsewhere, sanctions and interventions would follow immediately. In a twist of irony, some Pakistani voices even suggested that Donald Trump once criticized for his bias toward Israel be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize if he could broker a genuine end to the bloodshed. This idea reflects both desperation and a recognition of how much influence the United States holds over the conflict. Whether such peace is possible remains another question entirely. The crisis at sea further highlights the global dimension. The Global Freedom Flotilla, a convoy of humanitarian ships carrying aid to Gaza, has faced relentless attacks, drones circling overhead, naval forces blocking their path, even gunfire to prevent medicine and food from reaching starving civilians. Activists from dozens of nations joined this mission, only to be branded as threats. Israel insists on its right to blockade Gaza, but critics argue this is nothing less than weaponizing starvation. Reports suggest that many of the drones used against the flotilla are American-made, reinforcing the perception that Israel's military might is merely an extension of US power. So the question arises, if Israel is such a small state, how can it wage war not only against Gaza but also threaten Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and even activists on international waters? The answer lies in its alliances. With American technology, European silence, and nuclear capabilities, Israel operates with near impunity. It is not Israel alone, it is Israel backed by the machinery of the world's superpower. Yet the tide of opinion is shifting. In the global south, from Latin America to Africa, sympathy for Palestine has reached unprecedented levels. Countries like South Africa have taken Israel to the International Court of Justice, accusing it of genocide. Massive protests erupt weekly in London, Paris, Berlin, New York, and beyond. The narrative once tightly controlled by mainstream media is now challenged by citizen journalists, activists, and ordinary people with smartphones. The story of Gaza cannot be buried. But why does Gaza matter so deeply? For Muslims, as mentioned, it is a holy land, a trust from God. For Christians, it is the land where prophets walked. For Jews, it holds their ancient history. In truth, Gaza is more than a strip of land. It is a test of humanity. If the world allows the destruction of a people so openly, what does it say about justice anywhere else? That is why millions who have no direct ties to Palestine still chant, "Free Gaza, free Palestine." They see in its struggle their own fight for dignity, for the right to exist. Palestine declared independence in 1988, and over 130 countries have since recognized it. Yet it remains without a seat at the United Nations as a full member, blocked again and again by American veto. Israel, on the other hand, was recognized within months of its creation in 1948, and admitted into the UN the following year. This imbalance reveals the truth. Recognition is not about legality, but about power. The genocide in Gaza is not born out of insecurity. Alone it is the continuation of a project to control land, resources, and identity. To erase the idea that Palestinians even exist. To many, this is the real reason behind the destruction. If Gaza is crushed, if its people are forced into exile, then the dream of a greater Israel can advance without resistance. That, critics argue, is why we see relentless bombardments despite global outrage. And yet, despite the bombs, despite the starvation, Gaza has not surrendered. Its people continue to live, to resist, to tell their stories. In their resilience lies the heart of this conflict. No amount of firepower can erase an identity so deeply rooted. The world stands at a crossroads. Nations are finally beginning to recognize Palestine, not out of sudden goodwill, but because the truth can no longer be hidden. The genocide in Gaza has forced a reckoning. Those who continue to arm Israel must answer to history. Those who march for Gaza carry the torch of conscience, and those who survive in the rubble remind us that justice delayed is not justice denied, it is justice betrayed. So the question is no longer whether Palestine will one day be a recognized state. The question is whether the world will allow justice to come before it is too late. Because Gaza is not just about Palestine. Gaza is about us, all our humanity, our morality, and our future.